Welcome back. I want to show you something really cool. Are you ready? So this is a customer journey map that specifies a 12.5 hour window between the start of a business traveler's day and the flight home. And this journey map tells us a few different things about this individual. First of all, we can see the user's specific actions as they occur at different times of the day. And second, we can see what sort of digital device that this user is utilizing at these different times of the day for these actions. And finally, we can see some detail about this particular user's perceptions during these actions. And right away, I want you to notice how concrete this simple visualization is. It's all on one page, but it tells a complete story. And because everything's so organized and put together in such a readable format, we get an excellent vantage on this particular customer's experience and how his attitude is shaped by the interactions he's having with the transportation companies helping him to get home. And we learn some additional detail as well. This is a last minute flight booked due to meetings getting out early. The individual is experienced, flies a lot, but anxious about this particular day. There's a lot of communication between him and his family at different points. The day's itinerary starts off uncertain and gradually solidifies as the day goes on. And we can see that ultimately he gets home. It's a fascinating story, and it's all presumably sourced from qualitative research about experiences much like this one. So this visualization that I just showed you, as I mentioned, is called a journey map. And it's one of many that you can use to represent qualitative data. Journey maps are really great for exploration or drill down types of research because they allow you to showcase something in a way that is a little bit novel or which helps to explain it in a lot of depth and detail. And they generally are used to display the process that a typical customer uses to purchase or make use of a product or service, or explain how different personas or segments behave differently from one another on this journey. Along with that, we might look at segments or personas, and these are again good in exploration of drill down, and they can be paired with journey maps really well. But segments or personas, which we can also do quantitatively, but qualitatively, we can build these segments or personas, and they can display the different groups of participants who tend to express common attitudes based on some criteria uncovered in your research. And I'm going to show you some examples of these in just a moment. We can also use perceptual maps. Perceptual maps, again, can be built through quantitative means, but they're also able to be built through qualitative data. They're often used in a drill down capacity, and they can display how different participants tend to fall along perceptual ranges based upon sentiment analysis or other attitudinal data. A couple other visualizations that I think are a little less useful are word clouds and bar charts. They both kind of use for the same idea. Word clouds tend to show up a little bit more in things like idea generation. Bar charts you might find more in testing or in trying to understand just general themes that are coming up. But you'll see both of these being used to talk about keywords or phrases that occur most commonly in a data set. And with word clouds, you might display their magnitude through varying size, and with bar charts, maybe more through frequency. So let's return to talking about journey maps for a moment, because they're a really neat tool that can be used not just to display data, but also to tell a story. And we'll talk more in our next lecture about storytelling, but for now, I'd like to focus on how this visual format makes things so much easier for a data end user to read and understand. And let me show you some examples. So this is one journey map example. And the idea here is, and this one is rather complicated, but we have different types of stages that a customer might go through: a research stage, a comparison stage, a workshop stage, a quote stage, and a sign-off stage. And there are questions that they might ask during these phases. There are emotions and feelings that they might have. And then there might be things that they're thinking about, which we can anticipate and then be ready to address as the service provider that is attempting to help them through all of these different stages. So this is a journey map that's pretty simple. It's not real complicated to put something like this together, but it's organized and it's clear, and you can see, by just kind of looking at this almost like a cross tab or a banner tab, where if I want to understand what's happening in a particular stage, what questions might be asked, or what emotions might be felt, or what actions we can take, it's really easy for me to zone in on that concretely. Here's another example of a journey map. This one is kind of complicated. I don't necessarily love the design of something like this, but if you have to explain this process, it is fairly visual for someone to be able to kind of remember these different stages that are going on. So we're talking about a prospect here and the experience that they're having. And first of all, the things that might peel them off right away during the initial experience that they're having: awareness, relevance, consideration, inquiry, or sales encounter. And then we move them on through this lengthy process, which looks like a business to business process. And we have this cycle that goes on that might lead them to reorder, might lead them to leave, might lead them to become a lapsed customer that we can bring back into a reorder. So all these loops mean something, and they tell us different things that might happen within a customer experience. And then we even have this little subgroup here about account and contact management that tells us kind of this never-ending cycle of what we can do to keep people on this pathway so that they'll continue to want to reorder with us. That's another journey map. And then a third one, this is one that's a little bit more personal, and it talks about different stages of a journey. So we have identifies informational need, looks for information, finds information, and then seeks help. And what's interesting here is that they included some kind of uh, uh, feelings or attitudes that can happen at different stages as things are going on during this information search process on this USA.gov website. And again, they express the activities, the feelings and needs, and then the opportunities for improvement at these different stages to help to understand where this journey can be improved or where interventions are required in order to ensure that a customer has a good interaction. What you'll notice about all of these visualizations is that they are not presenting raw data. They're presenting an interpretation of those data, one that's presumably backed up by direct quotes or other information that was collected by the research team. But what makes these visualizations interesting and helpful is that they don't just describe a one-dimensional process. They offer multiple perspectives and give different perspectives on what's happening throughout a customer's journey. And yet, they have to stay grounded in what the research really uncovered. And they also require a lot of time and thought and creativity to put together. I'd also note once again that there are hundreds of templates for journey maps out there, and there are lots of designers who specialize in creating them. So if you're interested in creating these or making these, you don't just have to rely on your own creativity, fortunately, but finding the right template or right approach can be difficult and takes a lot of time and energy to put into it. Well, let's look now at perceptual maps. These are another tool that qualitative researchers can use, and as I mentioned, um, perceptual maps are often used for quantitative research, and methods like multidimensional scaling or factor or regression analysis can be used to make them. But they can also be used in qualitative research as well if the research team determines some way to measure sentiment or attitude in a manner that can be translated to a scale. And one common use of perceptual maps is to look at customer clusters and kind of see where customers tend to cluster together on different dimensions. But another is to look at how different brands fare along maybe two axes. In this case, we have an axis of quality, and then we have an axis of perceived price for different brands of candy bars. We can learn a lot from seeing how customer perceptions of these brands tends to group certain types of candies together, and also maybe where there's opportunities, like some of these brands are probably being rated at a lower quality, maybe qualitatively, than we would like to see them if we were the ones that own these brands, and we'd like to see them kind of push up towards the middle or upper tier of this axis. Another common visualization tool is a segment or persona description. And personas or segments are generally derived from finding groups of people within a sample who express similar opinions to one another and identify the themes that they express most commonly. And I'll show you a couple of examples here, both of which seem to be sourced from qualitative data. The first example shows a shoe shopper persona that includes some quotes from different members of this persona profile. Brandy may or may not be a real person, but and the researcher may have invented her or may have drawn her out from actual interviews conducted. But either way, personalizing her story here helps us to aid understanding about this type of customer who we can learn here loves shopping for shoes in person, but has trouble finding a pair that can fit her narrow feet. And so she's buying online even though she likes that in-person experience. And we can learn a lot about what she really wants out of her experience and maybe how we could serve her better. Now, we also have this definitely made-up profile of Tommy Technology. He's obviously not a real person, but he's probably based on real data. There's just assigned a fictional persona here, and this tends a little bit more towards psychographic and demographic data than it does towards things that are directly applicable maybe to a specific research problem. And I'm going to say some of the information in this particular example is a little too specific, and I'd be automatically skeptical of it. For example, we hear what kind of breed of dog that Tommy has, or what his favorite shows are, or things like that. But what's interesting here are that these there are some things here on the right-hand side which suggest that there are common attitudes for the salaryman type of worker person who can be understood for the purposes of product marketing or brand positioning. We learn a little bit about what his struggles are, what his challenges are, what he wants to get out of life, what he fears. And those are things that we can maybe address through some kind of marketing strategy. Now, two other common visualization techniques are word clouds and bar charts. And I'm not really going to show them in detail here because they're so common that I don't really feel like I need to. What I mainly want you to understand is that these types of visualizations both have their purposes, but they're often not much better than simply offering a summary table or a chart, and sometimes they even complicate things by not being as precise. So use them sparingly and always look for other better opportunities to help present a synthesis of your data rather than simply providing a visual output of it. That's just kind of the way these tools work. They're not really that useful. Another commonly uttered rule I would offer, and I personally don't always follow it myself, but that's to avoid using numbers as often as possible in qualitative reporting. In fact, the general guideline is that the only numbers you should include besides the sample size are the page numbers. Now that's a little hard to follow. It's not very practical or realistic, particularly if you conducted a hybrid study where you need to have some quant mixed in. But it is a useful goal to strive for, and it will help you provide a better report if you can minimize the numbers you utilize. And I would say where this rule is particularly useful is when you're talking about focus group research, because again, we tend to want to quantify things that happen, but in focus groups, we should avoid that as much as possible. So that's where this rule really works the best. Anyway, everything I've shared is just scratching the surface on data visualization, but I hope it's whetted your appetite for more. And in our next lecture, we're going to talk about another technique that's good for both reporting and for presentations, the art of storytelling.